Okay, Rashida, please share your introduction again so we can have it recorded.
Certainly, I'm just going to admit some more folks, and then I will reintroduce myself.
Okay.
Doris, 7.
Okay, that is better. So we still have a few folks in the waiting room, but I will go ahead with the reintroduction. My name is Rashida Tyler. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the New York State Council of Churches and the project manager for the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative. We would like to extend a hearty thank you to everyone who is joining us tonight for the Social Justice Committee workshop. I would like to turn it over now to Peter Cook, our Executive Director, to introduce himself and our next presenter.
Hi, I'm Peter Cook. I'm the Executive Director of the New York State Council of Churches and also Vice President of the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative, which is part of the faith-based partnership on affordable housing and community development.
So I'm Charles Ryu. I'm the pastor of Morningside United Methodist Church in Manhattan, New York City. And I am representative of New York Annual Conference of United Methodist Church to the Executive Committee of New York State Council of Churches.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. So we wanted to do a little bit of an intro here as well. We still have some more folks coming in the waiting room. So since I'm screen sharing, I may have to jump off from this and just admit some more folks. But in the meantime, we thought we would get to know people a little bit. We don't have much time for introductions because there's going to be so many folks on the call, which is a great thing. But we wanted to just go over quickly, if you feel comfortable sharing, your name, what organization and congregation you're with, if you're not with an organization, and what is your primary ministry area or your area of focus. So with that, I'm going to come off of screen share just briefly to allow some more folks into the waiting room. And there's no particular order. Anyone who feels comfortable can go ahead and introduce themselves.
So because we have a lot of people, you could actually start putting your names on and your ministry and your interest in social justice ministry on the chat.
Yeah. And then maybe briefly, we could just ask people to say your name and what city you're from.
Yeah, I am Abhidanand John. I am with the Episcopal Diocese of Rochester. Currently, I am serving as a rector at the Church of Ascension in the city of Rochester. And my area of interest currently is, since Rochester has become the hub for lots of refugees and immigrants, we work among the Afghan refugees. Already, we are working with the Karen community from Burma. We are also exploring to work among the Syrian Muslim community.
Thank you, Abhijan. Like others to speak, just give us your name and your city, if you can.
I'm Don Herring, and I'm from Albany, New York.
Great, thank you.
I'm Maddie Irvin, and I live in Endicott, New York, and with the room title with NAACP.
Vanessa P. Sheila Gillums. No, go ahead, Vanessa.
Vanessa Pugh Reefer was lay ministerial standing in the United Church of Christ and serving in White Plains with the Chatterton Hill Church.
Pastor Sheila Gillum, Shiloh Church of Christ, Disciples of Christ, New York, New York.
I'm Elise Higginbotham. I'm a retired United Church of Christ minister, and I live in New York, New York.
Linda Iannone, First Congregational Church of Ithaca, United Church of Christ.
Jim Grant, Area Congregations Together, Ithaca, New York.
Susan Switzer, I'm calling in from Essex, Connecticut. My home church is Riverside Church, and I'm part of the UCC Metropolitan Association Board and co-chair of the Social Justice Committee. Really glad to be here. Thank you.
Kevin Bottini. I'm with the Community Reformed Church of Colony outside Albany, New York, and I'm the deacon of community outreach for our church.
I'm John Parlberg, retired Reformed Church in America pastor in Albany, New York, and chair of the Social Justice Commission of the New York State Council of Churches.
I'm John Tenbush. I'm from Waddington, New York. Sorry, Carlene.
That's okay. Go ahead, John.
Yeah. John Tenbush from Waddington, New York.
I'm Carlene Joan from Canton, New York. We're both from the North Country.
Yana Landau, Brooklyn Friends Meeting.
I'm Evangeline Anderson Rajkumar, attending from Versailles, Indiana, in the Lutheran Church. I belong to the ELCA, pastor in the Lutheran Church.
Great.
Kevin Lovelady, I'm in Troy, New York.
I'm Jeff Corder. I'm in Forest Hills First Presbyterian Church, and I'm also chair of the Justice Ministries Committee for the Presbytery of New York City.
I'm Catherine Darcy. I'm a Sister of Mercy, and I'm located in Albany, New York.
My name is Melva Victorino from New York, Garden City Community Church in Long Island, and I am from the United Church of Christ New York Conference.
I'm Chris Wing. I'm actually a visitor. I live in North Carolina, though when I lived in New York, I was a member of South Presbyterian Church in Dobbs Ferry, New York. Down here, I'm a tender at Swannanoa Valley Friends Meeting. But I really am just here to listen.
Okay. So welcome everyone.
Gary and Judy Van Kennen from Emmanuel Congregational UCC Church in Messina, also from the North Country.
Great.
So thank you so very much for joining. Our workshop seminar is actually very, very basic framework that we will like to provide. Many of you are already in a lot of justice ministries, so this may be something that you already know, but our focus today is actually how to bring the social justice ministry to local church level. And so how do we help people in the local church level to organize for social justice ministries? And so let's begin with the scripture that you already know very well. So let me read first from Micah chapter 6, verse 6 through 8. And I'm going to actually post it on the chat as well. Now hear what the Spirit has to say to the church today. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression and the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? God has told you, mortal, what is good. what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. So here are our sort of liturgical religious things that's listed is directly connected to loving justice, doing loving kindness, doing justice, and walking humbly with God. So today you will hear a lot about a connection between our pastoral ministry and the justice. And just for a reminder, even though we all know it so well by heart, one of the classical texts that we use for our social justice and outreach ministry is from Gospel of Matthew. I think I might need to break into two segments to be able to share on the chat. This comes from chapter 25 of Gospel of Matthew, when he has this sort of final accountability day related parables, and goes like this. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at the left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you invited me." And then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry, gave you food, or thirst, and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? When was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me." The gospel of the Lord. So we are here to find a biblical grounding, which you already know, and how to teach and preach and to provide discipleship for the people on the pews and the people in the community that we relate to, so that they will be able to catch this vision of shalom that God has given to us. We often talk about speaking truth to the power, as in providing the criticism they need. But I think we as a people of faith also need to provide a vision of wholeness from the revelation of the loving God in Jesus Christ that we have inherited and we are called to proclaim to the world. So welcome once again. With that, we will begin with some pointers in doing social justice work in politically diverse congregations. Peter?
Great. Okay. So what we're going to hear now are sort of our pointers on doing social justice with politically diverse congregations. And in case you hadn't figured this out, all congregations are politically diverse. They are not all dominantly populated by Republicans or Democrats. And even within those political parties, there's a wide range of perspectives and differences. So we bring our political selves into congregations, and we honor the diversity of perspective that we find there. Of course, it's a little challenging to navigate this political diversity, but as we start to do social justice, we want to help all of you to be brave and to not have that scare you, but to actually embrace the diversity which is in your church and in your community, so that you can offer care and love and justice and mercy to your parishioners and to your community and the world as a whole. So as you listen to these points, take note in yourself what you agree with, and then also maybe something that would cause you a question or make you uncomfortable in some way. A myth's often heard in parishes that the church needs to stay away from politics. That is impossible. What you choose to talk about or not talk about is a highly political decision. Your silence favors some political perspectives over others and blesses the status quo. Consequently, some people in your church will feel they don't have a voice or are not welcome as you avoid the so-called untouchable subjects. In fact, your task might be to try to amplify that voice that does not have a voice in your church. Make a list of the things you think people would be too afraid to talk about, and then start there.
Another word of encouragement in this regard is that if you do pastoral care well, this pastoral care will give you room to do social justice. Doing good pastoral care is essential. It is not the vehicle to use so that you can do something else. Instead, pastoral care invites you to know your people and your community in their all diverse dimensions and depths. So spend time knowing your parishioners' stories and those of your community around your congregation. Your parish goes well beyond the people who are regulars at that church. If you build that awareness, you will see that the struggle of people often include dealing with structures and policies which inhibit their flourishing. Therefore, part of pastoral care means doing social justice, where you advocate for changes in structures, words, laws, and practices which cause physical and spiritual distress and destroy lives. So you are, all of you, are bearer of hope. So we try our very best not to fail to address the whole person by failing to offer comprehensive care. So our social justice ministry is part of our commitment to do comprehensive care of the people that have been entrusted to us within the church and around our church.
And so pastoring requires that you not treat some people as if they're more important than others.
Worship is a place which mirrors the whole of life. Do it well, but do it with humility. It's not a show, but an honest encounter with the living God. Create spaces in your worship for people to think, to be consoled, to be challenged, and to touch the mystery of God.
So when we preach, let us remember these words from Martin Luther. If you preach the gospel in all its aspects, with the exception of the issues that deal specifically with your time, you're not preaching the gospel at all. So when we preach, you're not preaching to get everyone to agree with you as a preacher, because preachers, you are not a marketeer. So you are a pastor and a teacher, both as clergy as lay. So we open up scripture and elucidate it to provoke the congregation to engage scripture and think about their faith in their concrete implications. So this is about helping people grow in their discipleship, not just telling them what they want to hear.
So consider having feedback or discussion groups, including right after worship, to reflect on the sermon, and create a safe space, a safe place for people to share their differences.
Most churches have political diversity. There may be a debate in your church about whether the government can address our economic needs or whether it is better to cut the government programs and give people more of the money to spend themselves. There are some things which the government needs to handle, and there are some things which are best handled by the private sector.
So in this effort, the key point is to build up a community with hospitality and playfulness. Let me repeat that. Build up a community with hospitality and playfulness.
That's right, Charles, Reverend Charles. And so your church, all churches, all organizations are not perfect. In fact, if people get the idea that you think you're perfect or the organization is perfect, they will find their spiritual experiences with you to be disingenuous. So you're better off if you confess that it has cracks, it's imperfect, and stand in profound need. We all stand in profound need of God's grace.
People sometimes say they come to church to be spiritually uplifted and not deal with politics. To determine what spiritual uplift might look like, you need to know who is in your church and community and their whole story, including their economic story. What is uplifting to some might be discouraging for others, especially if you avoid speaking to their situation.
So justice needs to happen in the community and at home. So seeking justice in your own community is part of your mission. That work becomes more authentic if your own house is in order and marked by just relationships. How are people paid? How are people welcomed? Can people bring their whole selves to your church or leave a lot of their pain at home just to keep up a facade, to fit in?
Right. And one of the most effective ways to engage your community and its needs and do more justice is to meet with the community and show up. Show up with your parishioners and not just by yourself. This is, by the way, a good way to introduce yourself to the community and have the community feel your church is with you. So you're going to find out where your parishioners are going and you're going to show up. You will see them in a different context, and they will be grateful that you know them and their struggles better.
Part of growing in discipleship is looking at your faith and having that faith inform your voice and your politics.
And it is, of course, true that a pastor or church cannot endorse a candidate for office. However, we can build a relationship with people in elected office and hold them accountable for their policies and votes.
When it comes to elections, turn your congregation sanctuary into a public space where issues can be debated and where you can hold candidate forums.
Assume that the statistics in your community generally reflect the demographic in your congregation. There might be some variations, but you will have a significant percentage of people who are spending too much on healthcare, housing, childcare, and will see little appreciable benefit from tax legislation. The needs of those parishioners are just as important as anyone else. Do not fall into the trap that these problems are reserved for people in another part of the state or another part of town. Assume the percentage of people in your church is about the same percentage of people who struggle in your community.
And as we do our justice ministry, have your congregation be engaged in this as Christian. It is very, very important that we do not, or that we are not afraid. So don't be afraid to build relationships with people of different faiths or even no faith. But be engaged in government and secular advocacy groups and find ways to speak to your faith in the public square, even if the situation feels highly secular. So harness the organizing efforts and staff of others and lend your encouragement. The church cannot do all this by itself and is very pretentious and misguided if it thinks it can. So you can also work with organizing groups which end up endorsing candidates, but you should keep your distance a bit and keep the focus on the organization's policy work.
Right. And it's not true that churches can't advocate for policies and laws, which it thinks will benefit the community, especially the poor and the disenfranchised. To the contrary, the church has a duty to do so and always has.
The church's building is there to facilitate mission and offer the gospel to your community. If your church is a fortress, you considerably limit your options.
So I think it's very important to remember that all of us here, all of you, are called and ordained to offer a public witness and be accountable for that witness. When you go to press conferences, speak. Take people with you, have them speak. If you do not speak, you yield the microphone to religious folks who offer theological distortions, which people will think represents the best thinking of the church when it does not. So this is a chance to give people.
Yeah, let me wash my hands and get a.
Cal, can you mute yourself?
Rashid, you were able to mute them because you're the host.
Yes, just give me one moment. Okay, I think they muted.
Okay, so let me just repeat that point. If justice-loving Christians do not speak, and you yield the microphone to religious folks who offer theological distortions, which people think represent the best thinking of the church when it does not. So this is a chance to give people different picture than the daily political religious gruel that they are subjected to on television and newspaper and online and the YouTubes and podcasts, etc., etc.
Right. So please understand that ministry is both joyful and a risky business. If you proclaim the gospel and build up the community, sometimes those offerings are accepted and sometimes not. The world and the situation around you can change dramatically, and you and the church might be able to address that change, but it won't be without stress. And you may not always succeed. It's hard, but you can't beat yourself up too much if you fail, because many of us, if we are doing anything of significance, sometimes do fail. Learn the best you can from failure, but see it as a chance to offer your gifts in another sphere.
Use Facebook and other platforms to add to the public conversation and also to see what others are saying.
Mm-hmm. And as I said a little earlier, again, think ecumenical and think interfaith. And to do that, please know the tradition of your own denomination. bring the gifts of that tradition into public conversations.
Right. And we're closing out here with one of the last pointers, which is that doing justice is not all up to you. We must rely on God's grace. I like the Lutheran mission statement, God's work, our hands. In fact, that's a phrase that's run through this organization for a very long time. But we are not God, but instruments of God, and quite imperfect.
And finally, remember that you are called to do God's work, but you need to let God do some of it.
Right.
Okay. So could we just offer a few reflections on what you heard? What resonated for you and what made you uncomfortable? Have a few responses.
And you can unmute or raise your hand if you want to contribute.
Thank you, Peter, thank you, Charles, and thank you, Sister Rashida, for this wonderful presentation. No, it inspires me to step in because as I was listening, you have made, especially me, or the the entire team, to think boldly about doing social justice as a faith community. Um, one of the challenges I like to start with challenges. I'm sure the whole team understands about social justice issue is an immediate call or the only call for the church to engage because I feel mission is a holistic engagement and the worship impact is an invitation to deal with the society around us. Um, the problem basically is, I think, how far we are equipping our church to participate at the political, platform is one of the challenges that I face personally. Since there is a great divide within the church because of the political standard, it's very difficult for us to bring awareness and to educate people to take their own stand. As a religious educator, I find it very difficult because people have different understanding and perspective towards life. It has its own nuances because of their brought up, because they were influenced by so many other issues, which is interconnected with capitalism, which is interconnected with nationalism, which is interconnected with racism, which is interconnected deeply with the patriarchy, colonial, and whatnot. You can go on with so many traits. So, but people are ready to do charity work, but they are not ready to do transformative work. When we ask for food, people are ready to give. When we ask for dress, people are ready to give. When we ask for dollars, they pour dollars. I'm sure about it. But when we look into the attitudinal change and the transformative society, I find it's a little difficult. So still, with humility, we display justice and voice for justice with an affirmative, action. And really, I'm struggling in that. I think this is very essential to have interfaith dialogue as well as interdenominational dialogue. It is not only with the interfaith dialogue, I think we should extend even people, those who are atheists, because atheists do believe in beloved community. And I think we have to work towards everyone who's an ally of this particular, agenda. Thank you. It's a small thought I want to share.
So some others briefly, what resonated for you and what made you uncomfortable?
So much resonated. It's very well written. I want to hear it more. Especially the things that we don't speak of, helping people not feel welcome. That the subjects are there, the topics are there, and if we're not putting them out there, then people will not feel welcome in that way. I think the part that I'm uncomfortable with is I don't have a lot of Bible in my church, in my worship. So I love hearing it, but it is not my common knowledge. And so that's the part I shy away from a little. But I feel very moved by everything that you all said, and it speaks very truthful to my experience. Thank you.
Others?
I was very taken by one of the early points about the importance of pastoral care. I know that often if one as a clergy person or as a lay leader has a great passion for public issues and for social justice, we're inclined to think of pastoral care. Pastoral care needs to be done. It's our job as pastors, but we also think of it as kind of a route to credibility for us. And I think as much as we could, that this is a way of knowing people's own situations and translating that into wider concern for human welfare. I just was touched and taken with the way that all of you in one way or another articulated the need to know our congregations. I think Peter, you specifically said know their economic stories as well as other aspects of their story, and recognizing that there's a link between pastoral care. It's not one or the other, and it's not something we do to make sure we're visiting people and loving them so that we can then go off and still be trusted if we go out and speak publicly about something, about a public issue. But the two are linked, and that was important for me to hear, and I appreciate you making that connection.
Great.
I also appreciated the statement about how good pastoral care opens the door for social justice issues. So as soon as I heard that, I immediately started creating a checklist in my mind about, a self-examination to say, well, have I really engaged the congregation that I have with sensitivity and compassion, and how can I expand the borders of the compassion and sensitivity that I've already shown? My tension arose in the statement about turning the sanctuary into public space, because my feeling as I look at my congregation, I see so many of the majority of them, and I could even say us, are dealing either with health or housing issues or even financial issues. And it's essential for my congregation to come into the sanctuary believing and accepting that the church is holy ground, it's safe space, it is a place to heal, to mend, to be strengthened. But by the same token, I, as pastor, seeking to be a liaison between my faith community and others who are seeking faith community or just seeking sanctuary, is if we are using our building and our time for sanctuary, how are we then making sanctuary for others who are not so favored as we are?
Okay, thank you. Could we have time for two more comments?
I want to acknowledge that also pastoral care and social justice work and preaching can be in tension, but I think it's a healthy tension. When I'm planning to preach maybe a somewhat hard-hitting sermon on a justice issue, and then remember that in the congregation that Sunday is likely to be a woman who just lost her husband, or another person who was just diagnosed with cancer. And to hold that in a kind of healthy tension. I know I've felt when I was a pastor, I'd preach what we call a justice sermon, and the next Sunday I just had the desire to come back and be the most gentle, caring person in the pulpit that I could be. But I think that's a kind of healthy tension, and I think we just need to be aware of it and acknowledge it. And not every sermon is going to meet the needs of every person in the congregation that Sunday, and acknowledge that as well.
Great. One more.
I guess I'll talk. There's the connection between pastoral care and justice work, but there's also a connection between charity, caritas, and justice work. And there is also a tension. I'm sure all of you know the old adage that, when I gave food to the poor, I was considered a saint. When I asked why do the poor have to starve, I was considered a communist. And working on that, actually Peter and I have talked about this, that there are two sides of the same coin, that they should not be considered opposed to each other. But in many churches, they are. And many times you get the argument that doing justice work is really not Christian. I mean, especially during these very, very troubled times, when there is a narrative regarding Christian nationalism, and there are many people who may be silent about that, but who agree with that. And so when you talk about diversity, this is a very challenging thing to provide that inclusivity and embrace everyone.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for those reflections. We will be posting all of those points on our website, so you can go back and ponder those and share them, through your networks and in your communities. We're now going to move to the next section here, which is really focused on pastoral care, evangelism, anti-racism, and politics, and how it is that we listen to our congregations in our.
So before I do my segment, just responding to what Dalia just shared, one of the reasons why Peter, Rashida, and I sort of framed the social justice ministry from pastoral care and even evangelism is precisely because there has been sort of alternative Christian narratives like Christian nationalism and all those things. And people who are less concerned about justice seems to have more airtime. And so that people who are committed to social justice ministries need to claim all those things in terms of our identity in Christian identity and the vocation coming out of it. So the scripturally based, so the pastoral care based, so the evangelism, good news based, so that we reclaim our identity as what we consider to be more responsible and authentic historic Christian expressions. So let me just repeat, social justice springs from good pastoral care. We'll just keep repeating that. And as John mentioned, when you're pastorally sensitive to the pastoral needs, it gives more reserve we could use to be more bold in prophetic justice ministries. So for example, this is example actually Peter gave me. When you visit someone in a nursing home, we do so-called pastoral care, but we could also be not just interested in spirit only, but ask questions, what kind of financial burden there may be to provide this kind of caregiving. And how many people in our congregation are burdened with caring for the people in their later stages of life with dignity. And that's and why are there economic disparities? So all those questions needs to be part of our visit to nursing homes. So in short, the people whom we care are living in a setting that enables or hinders their thriving, being able to express fully the image of God with which we are all created. And because the social living condition in totality is decided by the political process over time, be it local, state, or federal. If we want to improve our living conditions and the people we care for, we have no choice but to be politically involved. Otherwise, as one of the points that was made by Peter, that we become silent, therefore we keep the status quo. So this process of connecting pastoral care to social justice begins with really intentional, active listening to people in your congregation and the community around your congregation. So with that, I hand it over to Peter.
So before we establish or repurpose a social justice committee, and we're going to talk about how to do that, we'd like to suggest that you do in your congregation a few listening sessions. And I'm going to share with you some kinds of questions that you can ask in these listening sessions. And in addition to those sessions, there might be some questions that you have through one-on-one conversations with people. In community organizing parlance, the foundation of organizing is doing one-on-one conversations, which is just another way of saying good pastoral care, but it's also a process of really deeply listening. But try to set up a couple of listening sessions, some small groups to listen in and have people hear each other. So here's some questions you might ask in a listening session. In the last 6 months, was there a sermon offered that could be construed as political, quote, unquote? Pro tip, all sermons are political in that the preacher makes a political choice about what they talk about and what they don't. But ask people, how did they feel about that sermon? And what was the response from them personally and in your congregation? Were there mumbles in coffee hour or compliments? Was there a note, positive or negative, sent to the pastor? Were people cheering or walking out in the middle of the sermon? Just see what people say. What issues, if they were discussed in your congregation, do you suppose would be considered divisive or hard to talk about? Or how many people in your parish struggle to pay their utility bills and or suffer from environmental and climate hazards in their home or community, like truck emissions causing cancer or asthma outside of public housing? For instance, that's a real problem in the South End in Albany. Or fossil fuel emissions from furnaces, poor infrastructure, or bad drinking water, like lead in the water. What can you do to make utility bills more affordable while eliminating environmental hazards in rental and owner-occupied housing stock? And we'll talk in a little bit about a program we offer to help people to solarize and to get a discount on their solar bill. Another question you might ask is, how many parishioners are rent burdened, by which we mean they spent more than 30% of their income on housing? In the state of New York, 50% of our population spends more than 30% on housing. Some 40, 50, or even 60%. And those percentages hold up pretty evenly whether you live in the city, in a suburban community, or in a rural community. Is there affordable housing and home ownership opportunities or proposed housing in your community which need your support? How can you lend your support and counter not in my backyard? People are all for affordable housing except when it's in their neighborhood. And how do we speak up? Does your community suffer from a history of redlining? What efforts are underway to reinvest in those communities? And are there landlords in your parish and the community who don't accept housing vouchers or other kinds of assistance to make it easier? Can you advocate for policies which would make rental housing more affordable and stop people from being evicted? Who among you are involved in home care, nursing care, or child care? Are there home care, nursing care, or child care givers or receivers in your congregation? What are their needs? What are their working conditions? How much are they paid? And what does it cost for the people listening and your parishioners to get home care, to get child care? Can they access caregivers? How much do your parishioners pay for skilled nursing? And how can you eliminate or alleviate their cost burden, like, for instance, advocating for programs which pay for long-term care? How much is child care? And is there legislation that might improve that situation? How many people in your parish are currently or formerly incarcerated, or who have family and friends who are justice involved? And what immediate care can be offered, and how will you work to change criminal justice policy on the local, state, and federal level to attend to this pastoral need? And then ask, are there 3 to 5 people in your congregation who have a particular passion for social justice? What have they been up to in the last 6 months? Do you participate in what they participate in? Have there been any significant rallies, actions, or public meetings in your community in the last 6 months? Who showed up? What were they about? What individuals or organizations organized and led those events, those rallies? And then who are the faith communities around you? And what are their social justice priorities, if any, of those communities? Do they differ significantly from what you regard as your congregation's priorities? For instance, you might have a Pentecostal African American congregation who's very engaged and your congregation is also engaged, but it might be that the issues that are important to you are different. And finally, do you have any elected or appointed people in your congregation? Who is your member of the state assembly and state senate? Do you know what issues are important to them? And are those the same issues that are important to you? So those are a few questions, but I wanted to ask all of you if there are other questions that you might want to pose in a listening session like this, or any other observations or feedback from what I've just shared.
Don't see anyone's hand raised. Oh, Dahlia.
Okay, here we go.
I think those are great questions, and I think it's a wonderful approach to ask about where are the parishioners and what are their struggles. One of the challenges, however, is if you have a primarily white congregation, middle-class congregation, for example, how to ask the question about racial justice, about immigrant justice, and how to have the conversation that we as Christians are Matthew 25 people, where it's not just about ourselves, but it's about the family of God, which is everyone. And I have found in my parish is a very progressive one, but those questions are very hard to approach, even in such a progressive parish as mine.
If I could just say, you know, usually if there is, say, for instance, a situation of redlining, which is now denying credit and the opportunity to build wealth in certain communities, which is a very racist thing, it's will affect people in your congregation who find themselves in that economic situation. And so part of it is to help people find themselves in solidarity with people of color who they might not really think of themselves as connected to, but in fact really are, and how white supremacy and racist policies is very damaging to everybody's spiritual health and prosperity. Jeff.
So one of the things that I think, and this is just something I've done, invite people to speak in your pulpit. I've had people of color come and preach. I had a transgendered woman come and preach. I had a formerly incarcerated woman come and preach. And then you have a conversation afterwards. You say, okay, we got a coffee hour. They're going to be around so that you can talk to them and hear more about their stories and learn more about it. And then it becomes a relationship instead of an issue. And so until you personalize it, I think it's kind of difficult. And if you have a majority white congregation, unless they know people personally that can tell the stories of how their race has been an impediment as far as trying to get credit or a job or a house until they hear those stories. It really doesn't connect. And so when they hear the person, see them and say, wow, I like this person. I feel something for them. I feel a connection. And then they hear how the system has set it up so that it's more difficult for them because of their skin color to get these simple things. Then they may be moved to say, yeah, maybe racial justice is something we need to look at and start to educate ourselves with. Just my thoughts.
So could I have one more, Abhi?
Thank you. When we invited the Afghan people to our church, for listening sessions to treat their trauma, there was lots of resistance from my church. All are predominantly it's a white congregation. But when we gave the invitation, some 7 folks came and attended that program. And when they started telling their stories, as you said, Jeffrey, I was able to see there was a transformation, and 100% in my church now they stand for the Afghan Muslims. They stand with them because they never had an opportunity to hear the different voice. And when they started about their feelings about the displacement, the trauma, the violence that they undergo, oh my goodness, our people, as I said earlier, from charity, now they are slowly moving towards this transformative, action with lots of affirmation. You are right. Listening the other voice is very, very important for me. Thank you.
Thanks. Very well said. And I'll just say I had the privilege of going to Abhi's congregation and spending some time there, meeting a very diverse and lovely group of people. Particularly, including a lot of youth from the Karen community that who did some carol singing in the afternoon with some elderly parishioners. So there was a nice intergenerational and cross-generational thing that happened there, full of joy and playfulness, but it also opened a lot of doors for relationship. Okay, very good. So now we're going to talk about setting up or repurposing a social justice or creation care community. Charles?
So all these aspirations we have need to be organized so that there is not just one time feel good I've done something, but ongoing engagement with whichever social justice ministry items that your church or group chose. And that organization is very important. We call social justice creation care committee. But I guess given the demographic sort of age of people who are here, we are mostly of a boomer generation and up. But in my work with the younger generation, this committee and governing body structure don't seem to work. But they do like to have a group of people come together to do some specific things together. So you may call it committee, work group, task force, even healing circle, whatever you want to call it. It's very, very simple. There are only 3 steps. It's so obvious. You have to set up a group. You have to set up a committee, number 1. If you set up a committee, number 2, you have to convene a committee or work group to do the work. If you do it, you got to establish activities and projects and strategize and follow through. Obvious, right? You set up a committee, convene a committee, and the committee does the work with the specific strategies and plan. So we're gonna take turns. I'll talk about setting up a committee, and Peter will talk about convene a committee, and then Rashid will talk about how to once established activities are there and how to undertake those things. So setting up a committee. As I said, typically we have a governing body for a social justice creation care committee or another entity or task group that does justice work. That's a typical way that I guess most of us say, like, I'm 64, right? So who are groomed to think it that way. It needs some creative tweaking. So I remember in a lot of congregations that have younger people, they wanted to do something. Some people come to me saying, I want to do work on this. And my answer is, go and find at least 2 more people that want to work on it, come up with a plan, and let's try to get forgiveness and permission. Okay, let's begin the work. So given that, let me just share with you the process. So if you already have a social justice outreach mission and anti-racism or creation care committee or task force, find out who it is on it and what they currently do. So many of these committees may be name only or one-person operations, and our job is to make them at least 3 people work, and they actually have specific work and ministry items. They do it continuously and constantly. So what are the caveats and assumptions which shape the purpose of the committee? Number 1, social justice committee or work group or circle should have an ecumenical and interfaith mindset. In addition, include and embrace people of no faith and support their leadership as well, as we mentioned earlier. Social justice is not a branding opportunity for your congregation or denomination, even though if you are known in your community for working well with diverse group of people, it'll reflect you well. Number 2, we talked about charity earlier. Charity is a very important vehicle to build relationships like food drives, school backpacks, gift cards, cash assistance, gun buyback. And it's a very good precursor for organizing. However, it is not a substitute for helping congregations to do justice in their community, such as establishing state and federal funding for food banks, addressing food deserts, and strengthening social safety net, including healthcare, building clean energy infrastructure, childcare, home care, and enacting federal gun legislations, etc., etc., so that your charity work can be sustained and reach out better. And unit number 3, harness the organizing capacity and staffing of other groups, that is secular and religious, such as New York State Council of Churches, Poor People's Campaigns, and all those things. There are allies in the community that are already working on that issue. Connect with them. There is no need to duplicate staffing and resources. Number 4, remember that local, national, and state and global justice work are all interrelated. So try not to fall into trap of taking care of your own first logic that we hear all the time. Generosity begets more generosity and creates more life-giving relationship in the process. And once you have a group, you need to create a charge for that committee. The purpose needs to be clearly stated. So the purpose of social justice, a Christian care committee or work group circle, are to help the congregation and members of its neighbors and religions to do justice locally, statewide, nationally, and internationally. And let me repeat. Yes, those people who are passionate will do the work, but oftentimes only they are the ones doing the justice work. So social justice committee in the church, their purpose is to help the congregation and members of this neighborhood to do the justice work locally, statewide, nationally, internationally. So as you talked about justice ministry as part of or organic dimension of pastoral care, you could make this committee to become a subcommittee of a pastoral care or trustees or governing body, because justice work is actually the reasons why church exists. So remember, the work involves making connections with other aspects of congregations ministry. So don't work in isolation. 4 caveats that I like to make. Remember, the committee is not there to do all the work, but to enable others in the congregation to do the work and live into their baptism for Christians and the sense of discipleship and live out the faith's ethical principle. So committee should not do everything for congregation. Your pastor, rabbi, imam, or other clergy persons are not there to do social justice on your behalf, but to do it with you. They must equip congregation to do the work and join. And as you think about the people to be in this committee or are currently on the committee, and ask, what is it that you have become passionate about, and provide the faith framework to give them sense of affirmation of the calling they have. If they haven't had it, give them the direction. And who are the people in your congregation who have a passion to do justice? Would some of them be willing to serve on committee if there's none? Work group, collaborative, empower others to do justice ministry. As I said, 3 people, hopefully more. And who are the equippers, teachers, information disseminators, point persons, leaders among these peoples. So part of leadership role as a pastor or lay leaders is to know the gifts that are already there in congregation and coalesce and connect those gifts so that the work of social justice ministry can be organized and sustained, and in the process train the rest of the congregation. As I said many times, membership can be as few as 3, as many as 12 or more. But if the group gets big, it's good to divide into different concentration, different arenas, so that it becomes more nimble. Consider adding non-members, that's a non-church members, activists, and others to your committees for their interests. And that's actually one of the best evangelism there is in church growth strategy. So with that, that's how you set up a committee, and how to convene. I hand it over to Peter.
So once this committee, however you define it, has a clear charge and has an understanding that they are not there to do the work, but to equip the congregation to do the work of discipleship. We suggest that you have an opening meeting where you talk about the purpose of this committee and then review the charge to the committee along with the caveats and assumptions that you just heard. So basically, what the thinking was that went into creating the committee, you now want to reestablish that in terms of your opening meeting about its purpose, and primarily help them to understand of how they use their gifts to equip the congregation to live into their baptisms and to do social justice, to be disciples.
Now, Rashid, would you lead us into step 3? Now that we have it, we convene, what do we do?
Absolutely. So now we want to establish the activities of your committee, the activities your committee will undertake. If you've already done a listening tour, you're going to want to, take in what you've learned. If you will be sponsoring a listening tour, you're going to maybe even, make some plans about what you hope to learn from those sessions. So the committee is going to sponsor and organize one or more conversation with your congregation and also with the members of the community. So activists, neighbors, businesses, unions, workers, elected officials, homeowners, and residents. Cast a very wide net. Don't leave out the unhoused as well, to include all of those in your communities. If there's a nursing home and people who can't make it, maybe have a special panel there. So, meet people where they are. Signing up, you can sign up for other networks and organizations, such as the National Council of Churches, the World Council of Churches. You can also sign up for our newsletter, which is on Action Network. And we're going to be dropping some of those links in toward the end of the presentation. And basically just get connected. Please check on the council event page and send us your events and your activities as well, because we like to connect people, let people know what's happening at congregations around New York State. We represent all congregations throughout New York State, over 7,500. So there's literally something happening all the time, and we like for everyone to stay informed. Also, we want to make sure that anyone in your judiciary or in your church's administration are also receiving our newsletters as well. And you also want to participate. So you want to participate in the New York State Council of Churches issues, seminars that we run throughout the year, and contribute to the creation of the council's annual state legislative ask. That is really fun. It's a really great place to start. Also, sign up people in your congregation to participate in the council's ecumenical advocacy Ecumenical and Interfaith Advocacy Day, which is held on March 18th and 19th of this year. So you're going to be seeing more information about that, but this is a great opportunity to get involved. I actually run a workshop on doing advocacy there for people who are new and may not have interfaced with an elected official before. You're also going to want to educate. I think education is key. So you're going to want to show a video of this training with these questions that are being asked to those who are, involved in your committee, and show other media, YouTube, other places like the National Council of Churches, the World Council of Churches. Those are great resources. Your church body may have a learning resource as well, and those are great places to tap in. You're also going to want to get to know your legislators. I really want the faith community to not be afraid to approach those elected officials. Around election time, they come, they ask for the vote. So continue the relationship after the election. You can do a small campaign with your congregation to ensure that everyone knows who their assembly person is, their state senator, members of Congress, and U.S. senator. Basically, you'll furnish them with their contact information, their email, their mailing address, and their social media accounts. A lot of elected officials now are on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter, and they are paying attention to those accounts as well. And don't leave out TikTok. And you also want to make sure your congregation is registered to vote. Ask that they request to be placed on your mailing list, and also on the mailing list of their elected officials. So also be sure that your parishioners know the council person that represents them at the local level, because a lot of politics are hyper local, and people are not necessarily showing up to the Tuesday night planning meeting, but it's very important that they do. And the mayor and their county executive or town supervisor. So we have several resources which we're going to be placing on the New York State Council page, which will help you get to know your legislator and locate and find out who they are. And so don't be afraid to meet with your elected officials, to invite them to speak at your church, to open space for public conversation. And you want to promote and network. So you're going to want to serve as a clearinghouse of information to identify ways that congregants and community members can attend and participate in social justice activities in your community. And you do not have to organize all the events. In fact, most of them you will not and should not organize, but you can encourage people to go to those events sponsored by others and lend your congregation's name as a sponsor. You can send the council an email if there's an event that you or your community want to promote, and we will amplify that. And so you're going to want to familiarize yourself with and catalog social justice pronouncements from your denomination or your judiciary, i.e. on gun violence, access to affordable housing, environmental racism, and so on and so forth, racial justice. And you're also going to want information from local, state, and national and global religious bodies as well. So check out the New York State Council of Churches website, our resource page for reference. And get yourself on many mailing lists for denominational and advocacy groups. And one of the most important things, finally, one of the most important things you're going to want to do is show up, show up, show up. Encourage people to show up at community events, rallies, government hearings, and government meetings, to listen, to meet people, and to speak. Learn that during your conversations, your parishioners are already engaged in the community, and you're going to want to ask the congregation how the congregation can support the work that's already underway. So move out of your comfort zone, show up, serve, participate, listen, and receive, and give hospitality. So that's really the last step for in establishing your social justice committee and getting it activated, the duties of your social justice committee. So with that, we're going to transition into kind of some of the things the council does around social justice, how we work through things around housing, and solar, you'll hear about a little bit later. So I'm going to speak to you about social justice and your faith property. So my other hat is as the project manager of the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative, as Peter mentioned, which is also part of the Partnership for Faith-Based Affordable Housing and Community Development. And so I do have a quick presentation, but I don't want to take up too much time. So I'll go over it briefly. So I will share screen and then pull that up. And you know, it really just explains a little bit more about the work of the partnership and how we try to help faith-based organizations across New York State. And this is open to all denominations and religious organizations of all faiths as well. So I will briefly share a screen, and as you can tell, I talk pretty quickly, so I will go through as quickly as I can. Okay. So the faith-based, the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative, as I mentioned, is a partnership with 3 other organizations. So we also partner with the Partnership for Faith-Based and Affordable Housing and Community Development, and Bricks and Mortals, and the Interfaith Assembly on Housing and Homelessness. And so this is a longer presentation, but I'm just going to go through it to briefly explain kind of how we go about implementing social justice and working with faith-based organizations around the issue of housing. So the Partnership for Faith-Based Affordable Housing is a is a mission working with institutions in New York City on mission-driven real estate development opportunities. And we seek to build relationships, educate, and engage faith-based organizations around public housing issues, zoning, comprehensive plans, budgeting, and financing in connection with affordable housing and homelessness. And the partnership is funded in New York City by Trinity Church Wall Street. We're able to make pre-development loans of up to $30,000 to congregations who are considering building affordable housing. With our process, we help churches go through all of the preliminary steps of that housing. Our policy work also helps us to ease things like restrictions and zoning that inhibit the ability for congregations to build affordable housing. So the New York State, the collaborative is really New York State focused. We're actually working with several groups right now in coalition, sponsoring, working on legislation called the Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act. And you'll learn more about that over the months to come. But essentially, it means that if your church is interested in building or developing, you'll be able to build up to around 3 stories outside of New York City as of right, and up to 5 stories as of right within New York City. So not having to go to the zoning board to get approved for that. And so that helps churches to be able to know the freedom that they can develop with their current properties. And so we also provide technical assistance. We connect congregations throughout New York State with professionals that are vetted and that will help churches navigate the development process. One of the issues with churches developing is that they often run into a problem trying to get their plans past the Attorney General's office, because the Attorney General is looking out for churches and charities and wants to make sure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed, and that there isn't any conflicts of interest. So that's really one of the main things that we do, and that is a service that we do. And so this is the team. And I'll just explain a little bit more here about pre-development before covering our process and then heading back to the presentation. So pre-development is really the initial phase of housing development right before construction begins. And it's where planning and preparation is very important. And so we help churches really look at the feasibility of building a project, and then also the financial impact or considerations in that decision. And that's really helpful for churches who may, be considering, but may not have all of the pieces to the puzzle. And the expense of hiring the professionals to create or to put that puzzle together is prohibitive. So this program will help facilitate those considerations. And so our process is a 6-phase process. This is some of the things that we do in terms of one-on-one consultations, workshops, trainings, evaluation, providing partners, funding referrals. So in New York City, we are directly grant funded from Trinity Church Wall Street. And outside of New York City, we work with partners throughout New York State to help provide the professional services that churches need and faith-based organizations need to make those decisions about development. And so this pretty much explains what we do. So we have a 6-phase process, and the first really starts with discernment, which is that conversation. We have 8 questions that we ask. Your first kind of entree into the collaborative is to set up an interview with me, a one-on-one, and I'll start these 8 questions and go over them with you. And we'll complete as many as we can. I then go back and I pull in Peter and one of the other partners, and we hold a meeting, and we'll meet again with you and go over some of the things and ask more in-depth questions. And then once we feel that the project is feasible, we will send your application to our board, and you can start the process of finding someone to help you apply for the pre-development funds. So you don't have to do that on your own. You will have someone, a professional, who is providing that support. At this stage, it will be pro bono. And so that's really in a nutshell. The presentation is longer, but I want to make sure that we are using our time a little bit here so that everyone has time to speak. So I'm going to end sharing if I can and move back into presentation.
I think it's worth stressing that we'll have a much more comprehensive training and overview on our pre-development process on January 18th from 3 to 5, where we'll really break it down for you as you think about how your property can do social justice and be a blessing on your community, while also meeting some very real financial needs that your congregation might have in terms of renovation, deferred maintenance, and this kind of thing. So doing good many times has very strong financial benefits. For instance, we're working with a congregation right now that probably, when they get done with their process, will see, after building 80 units of affordable housing, about $2 million that would go towards the mission of the church itself. So it can be very beneficial, but it requires a lot of very careful thinking and a long-term view, but we help congregations navigate this complex development process.
Right. And so that's kind of also an example of direct action, where if your congregation has a mission centered on housing, and you do have property that you would like to utilize for affordable housing, that could be an example of direct action where your mission aligned and able to provide something to help with the issue that you're advocating around. So we really just want to stress to collaborate with those entrusted with stewardship of your property to ensure that the building on land and furthering the mission of your parish, clean energy upgrades, accessibility, community spaces, affordable housing are, options for your property, and that your property is a tool for outreach and for justice. And the building is not a country club for members. It is there to serve the community, it's there to serve your parishioners and your mission. So access pre-development assistance to evaluate options for your property. As I mentioned, you can give me a call or an email. I'm going to be dropping my information into the chat. And I'm going to turn it over to Peter to talk a little bit about solar.
Great. And I see we have a question here. Do we work across denominations? Absolutely. We're interdenominational, and we also help congregations that are not Christian repurpose their property. So we're not limited to Protestants or Christian organizations. We'll work with anybody. Independent congregations that might not be part of the traditional National Council of Churches list. It's really quite a wide open. Okay, so my next thing I want to show you is the second thing we can help you do with your property is to help you use your property to address climate change and to help bring about a clean energy future. And this is very practical, but basically what we do is we help congregations access community solar and also to extend that benefit to their congregants and community. And we have a grant from NYSCOC that helps us do this work, and it funds a partnership between New York State Council of Churches and Crowder Solars, who has about 60 years of experience in renewable energy and expertise in a whole variety of programs. And they've advised affordable housing developments and also houses of worship and how to solarize. So this is really a great partnership between the Council of Churches and Crowder Roof to give the best product possible to faith-based institutions and their communities. There are three ways in which we do solar. One is to help properties consider registering for community solar. It gives them 10% off their bill. If you sign a contract to do that, there's no cost to you. 10% off your bill. No hardware installation. Secondly, we can help parishioners also get 10% off their bill. And for every subscription that you offer, the church gets somewhere between $50 and $100 for every subscription that they sign. So if you, as a congregation, are struggling to pay your apportionments, say, to the denomination, this could give you a revenue stream while also doing good. And we can also consult with you about installing hardware on your church and accessing the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits. But if you do hardware installation, you can't also do community solar. So what happens is that if you sign up for community solar, you're working off of a solar farm somewhere in the state, which we arrange to connect you with, and you get 10% off your bill. So if you have a monthly electric bill of $1,100, you get bill credits of $1,000, a bill credit charges $9,900. It means that your net electric bill is $1,000 with a monthly savings of $100. $100 every month for 12 months, $1,200. You can kind of do the math from there. But while you're doing that, you are also benefiting the environment. It's an extension of your social justice ministry. Just give you an example that we work with Catholic Charities of Onondaga County, and we were able to figure out how to give them about $160,000 in savings over a 25-year period by subscribing 12 of their buildings for the National Grid territory. There's another example of Presbyterian United Church of Christ in Saratoga Springs, which did a solar campaign where they signed up 58 parishioners, each of whom got 10% off their bill, and the church saw $5,800 that came to them as a result of doing that subscriber campaign. You can do that in your church, and also you can take this opportunity out into your community, to your neighbors, your friends, the person you go to the gym with, wherever. And for each one that you sign up, they get 10% off their bill. And the church gets, in this case, it was $100 per subscription sold. So I will just end there to say that if you have interest in doing solar at your church, call me, and we will set up a consultation with you to help you get started. And if you have friends other churches who might be interested in this benefit, to just give us a ring, give me a call, and we will get you started. Okay.
So Peter, we may have noticed a question on the chat. Does the solar, community solar work help those with low-income housing living in low-income housing apartments?
Yes. Actually, primarily, the grant from NYSCOC is really targeted for people who are low and moderate income. We get credit for those folks who sign up, fit a certain demographic. It is available to renters and homeowners if they are separately metered. You know, if you're living in an affordable housing development where the development pays your heat and so on, then we would arrange with them the solar discount. Okay. All right. So so we're gonna now close out our session here and conclude our time. And let's see, I'm just trying. Okay, so Rashida.
Yeah. So we've been talking a lot about different programs and everything throughout the presentation. I'm actually going to drop some links in the chat so that you'll be able to access those things tonight. But we want to leave you with next steps. So tangible things that you can do when you leave here to, again, keep getting involved and to keep growing. Because our goal is really to make sure that the faith community is activated and it knows that it can participate in the political sphere, it can participate in the public sphere in pulling people into your mission and the work that you do. And then you can align with the work others are doing as well. So you can subscribe to our mailing list and also check out our website. We have upcoming events and that's frequently updated almost daily. And you can look for articles on our Facebook page, which is posted as daily as well. And you can sign up for our email list as well. So we do regular news blasts and let you know what's going on at the state, and then also what's going on with churches individually as well. And we again try to amplify those messages. So you want to be on our mailing list. If it gets to be too much email or you just aren't feeling it, you can always opt out as well. And please encourage your networks and your parishioners to sign up as well. You can send event notices to the council and we'll be providing an email address. It's actually NYSCOC@gmail.com, but that will be in the links as well. And you can attend our virtual open house on repurposing property on January 18th from 3 to 5 p.m. And that is the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative. So the presentation I did about like 5 to 7 minutes of is a longer presentation, but it's part of 3 partners that will be presenting as well, and they'll let you know what they do. So the question in the chat, I interpreted a little bit of that. We help churches consider affordable housing, other types of housing, market rate, and then also non-housing options. So things like grocery stores, community centers. So if your church or your property is not right for affordable housing, it may be right for another type of community. And so you can also promote the Ecumenical and Interfaith Advocacy Day, which will be on March 18th through March 19th. It will be in person in Albany. We hope to have a big showing there this year. Last year we had a great time. We had a press conference. We had many elected officials who came. And this is an opportunity for people who are just starting to organize or just organizing your social justice committees to really come and be in a safe environment where you have folks who will help you out if you are nervous or if you're looking for more information. This is definitely the place to be. So you can also participate in social justice ministries and education, worship, social justice seminars, issue seminars, and we're going to be having follow-up trainings. So we'll hope that you'll join us. And then there's denominational trainings as well, which are coming up. And we, again, will post those to our website and keep you informed. So if you want to also work on an issue, we have our social justice committee here at the council, which we have several members on the call. And we thank you all for being here tonight. Our immigration and food justice is led by Ms. Dahlia Herring. And housing is led by myself. Climate and environmental justice is run by Reverend John Perlberg. And wealth and global debt, taxation, and strengthening the social safety net is led by Reverend Peter Cook. And criminal justice is led by Reverend Jim Ketchum and Reverend Chibuze Okori. And wages and unions and healthcare are led by Sister Faith Colligan and Peter Cook. So, we do hope that you run or establish a few listening sessions for your congregations. And then again, show this recording to your governing body or establish a committee and discuss as you set up or repurpose a social justice committee. Also, we are here to help. Please reach out to us at the council if you are setting up a committee and you run into a question or you're unsure of something. We're more than happy to help out. So be sure again that your congregants know who represents them, who your assembly member is, who state senator is, your school board members, other elected officials. And are there any in your congregation? That's a good thing to know too. Will you invite them to your church to worship with you and to speak? Ask them what issues are important to them and share what issues are important to you. And again, I will drop my information in the chat and Peter's as well. So if you would like to consult with us about housing or solar, we're here for you. And I'd like to turn it back over to Peter to close out.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us here. And we hope that this was helpful to you. We will be doing further follow-up seminars as we go. For instance, like a seminar on worship and social justice. We'll do issue seminars on all of the issues which we just mentioned. And again, we just really urge you to stay connected with us. Watch our webpage every day. We are literally updating that page daily with new events that you can connect with in your community and across the state and nationally and internationally. So when you hear of one and you get one in your inbox, forward it on to us and we'll go ahead and post it on our site. So, thanks everyone, and may the peace of Christ be with you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Nice meeting you.
Thank you. Great workshop.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you.
Very good. So